Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Welcome to another episode of Tai'Shar, Manethrin, a Wheel of Time podcast. I am Will.
I'm Sam.
And we are continuing our journey through the Shadow Rising. So, Sam, why don't you take it away? Chapter 36?
Chapter 36. The Aiel with Ran leave Rodion, as do the Shido. Supposedly, the piece of Rodion extends to the trip home, but mistakes have been known to happen, so Ruark sends out scouts, sets a reared guard of stone dogs, because, once you get it far enough away from Rodion, things might happen.
Right.
Avienda is waiting outside Rand's tent, and her first words are, "Elaine is the woman for you." Uh-huh. He asks what she means, and she just starts quoting the Song of Solomon, basically. It's what it seems like.
It does get pretty awkward there for a few
And
minutes.
he's like, "Whoa, I just woke up. What are you talking about? Stop it."
Honestly, as far as description goes, that's about as explicit as things get in this book series.
Exactly, yeah.
This is this moment when she's describing Elaine to him.
So then after that little tidbit, we're on to Matt, who is observing as the Aiel meet a group of peddlers' wagons. Matt's just chatting with Rand about it, and I can remember merchants who came to Immense Field with fewer wagons, and Rand grins and says, "He came into the waste. I wonder if he will leave it again." Jeez, man, some joke, kind of dark.
Yeah.
Of course, he kind of calls it like he sees it, and he's saying like, "Oh, they're all dark friends." It's like maybe if you just saw a bunch of random peddlers in the middle of the desert, it's like, okay, well, you can kind of see how he could get there, right?
Sure.
Yes, he's seeing dark friends everywhere he goes, and in his dreams and stuff, and it's like, so there is some paranoia there, but also this is kind of suspicious generally. Anyway, so Ruark and Hiron go out to meet the peddlers at the same time as Couladin. So Rand and Matt follow them along with Avienda. And the main peddler's name is Hadnan Kadir, who said he's headed to Cold Rocks. Ruark points out that he's going in the wrong direction and says that, you're pretty close to Rodion, and that seems to sort of upset him. He's like, "Oh, I did not mean to be close to Rodion."
Because he knows he's not supposed to be.
He does know. Heading
to Rodion. Within this book, we do discover that there may have been some reasons why they were being misdirected towards Rodion.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we do. Matt offers to buy Kadir's hat, and he's kind of got like a wide-brimmed hat, and he's like, "I'd really like that hat." An enormous woman named Kael Sheogi accepts, snatching the hat from Kadir, and is like, "Sold."
Pretty big moment, because this is a defining trait for Matt for the rest of the series, is that he's
got his accoutrement, he's got his hat and his shandarai. He's set. And his scar around his neck, of course.
I think there is a Twitter account for Matt Cawthon's hat, if you want to get its opinion on things. I tried to get the Sorting Hat to weigh in on who should play Matt Cawthon's hat, because it also has a Twitter account, but it never responded to me. So
it was busy sorting, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. It's probably the first years are coming in.
Indeed. Matt briefly notices a gleeman, though he vanishes before Matt can go get a chance to talk to him. He sees his patchwork cloak. So Rand says Kadir is dangerous because his eyes never change. Then Rand commences to mutter to himself again. Just not doing himself any favors here in the sanity department. Or maybe he's cultivating an image. I mean, I guess that's possible, but I don't think so. That doesn't seem to be what's happening.
I just want people to know that I am totally crazy.
I am just completely going to live this up and cheese it up. So on to chapter 37, the Aiel decide to camp at Imri Stand because there's water there, though Rand really wants them to keep going. And this is Rand's perspective, so he smiles at Matt in a way he hopes is reassuring, but we can guess is probably kind of crazy looking, just given the way things have been going. So then the back and forth between Avienda and Rand continues about Elaine and etc. There's a house at Imri Stand that's covered in blood. Matt thinks Trollocs are to blame, but Avienda says Trollocs never come into the waste. We go hunt them. Then we are introduced to the Gleeman, Jason Natale, who does a great job of getting Matt to tell him everything that happened in Rodion with some well-placed flattery, implying he'll put Matt in a Gleeman's tail. Really, it's just that Matt just, wanted somebody to talk to, so he didn't mind really. He didn't tell him everything. He didn't tell him about the snakes and the foxes.
We were a little conditioned to trust a Gleeman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's just like, oh, he's going to tell a story, or he's going to make a bard's tale or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not forbidden for him to talk about Rodion like it is for the Aiel, so he doesn't really care about telling them about it. Natail and Kiel, the woman, have a very suspicious conversation where she's like, "We are not here for Rodion." Doesn't send off any alarm bells for Matt like it probably should have, or maybe it would for Rand. He's just kind of like, "Oh, whatever. Y'all are having an argument."
There's times where I think of the three boys that Matt might be the most oblivious to what is immediately going on around him.
He tends to be focused on like, okay, where's the next place I can throw some dice and have a serving girl sit on my knee, have a drink, and like he's like not very suspicious and just kind of like, let's just move on. I'm gonna get out of this.
Right.
Get out of what I'm doing here. So at dinner, Natail does tell a ballad, as a Gleeman should, of Manetheren. And Matt remembers it firsthand. Remembers it happening. This is like one of our first times where Matt is like realizing what the foxes have done to him here. They've given him some memories, just not the ones he wanted.
Yeah, to fill in. So, we're starting to get a picture that he has a lot of different memories, in addition to the fact that this whole time he's been translating the old tongue without any hesitancy or without even noticing himself. Rand is usually saying, I don't even think he realized he was speaking the old tongue or things like that. There, a lot more of that is happening. He seems to basically be fluent in it now.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like it's not just that he doesn't even realize it. Yeah.
Right. We got a sudden Trolloc attack.
Yes, we do. We were overdue for
507,
Yeah, so, Aviendha, you can probably eat your words now about the Trollocs not coming into the waste, I would say.
Yeah. But they will still refer to it as the Dying Grounds after this scene.
Right. So Moraine checks on Rand, finds he was uninjured, and then, like, Aviendha is, like, still just follows him and just waits outside his tent. He's doing what she was told to do, and he probably is at this point realizes what's going on, just kind of rolls his eyes a little bit like, they've sent you to follow me. Listen to me, haven't they?
We do get a little bit of an indication of what the Foxhead medallion might be for, too, as...
Oh, good point.
As Matt is fighting, every now and then the medallion grows cold.
Right.
So there's
channeling nearby, yeah.
Yeah, it's doing something, and maybe we don't fully understand what yet.
On to chapter 38, we check in with Dark Friends, the Black Aja, and the Shan-Chan. It's kind of like a little prologue in the middle of the book. We get like all of the minor characters and just kind of what are they doing. We get a Guinan, the Shan-Chan, who is waiting for a report from the Seeker for Truth, and she gets an Idam that he found, and she's just really aware of what's going on with the Soldam being able to channel.
As she leaves, she spots Bael Doman and decides to wait for him to leave so he won't spot her.
Right.
And then she sees Jakerim Carden, and then we swap over to Jakerim Carden's point of view. He's in a meeting with the noblemen of Terrebonne, including the king.
And I think this is when Leandrin sort of calls him out because she knows, she calls him by Bors, the name that was in the prologue. We're like, who is Bors? And then we found out much later and like, well, it came back and the name came back here.
Yeah.
So after she kind of like calls him out and kind of intimidates him, we switch over to Leandrin's point of view, and it's kind of interesting to watch her get taken down a notch in this book because she's like so sort of self-satisfied and in control of the Black Aja. Her plan is to find a way to control Rand, and they believe that they're going to find it here in Tanchico, and there is something to that, of course. But that's the Black Aja's plan. That's what they're doing there, and that's we know that Nynaeve and Elaine are there hunting them. So we go back to Guinan, and she confronts a intruder. Oh, actually, I think I misspoke earlier and said she was talking to a Seeker of Truth. This is when she encounters the Seeker of Truth, who is, basically a corporate man from across the ocean, who works for the Shan-Chan and is just checking on the progress of the members of the Blood who are left behind.
Right.
And he wants Guinan to make Soldam that she finds disappear, then return them to Shan-Chan, and ask for if she has any info on what's happened. So she doesn't really reveal anything to him. But then she goes to the basement after he's left, and where she has a Soldom captured who is leashed by an IDOM, because she's, she just knows what's going on. So she decides she needs to just, kind of confirm for herself if all Soldom can channel. And then it's like, this is dangerous information, what's going to happen with this? That whole subplot seems so removed from this book in particular, because the Shan Chan aren't really a part of it. So it's like, anytime we get to that, it's like, it's easy to just be like, I don't want to read this, because it's like it's not an immediate factor of like the Aiel and all the things that are happening there. But it does, of course, come back and end up being a very important subplot. Right. But it's just a great example of something that's like, well,
I think it also speaks to when an entire culture is built on a premise that is discovered by just any given individual in that culture to be completely false,
right?
Or in this case, really hypocritical. Then what do you, as an individual that's a part of that machine, do? Because I think what Egyan is going through in this is she feels powerless. She doesn't know how to begin to confront this.
Right.
And that's part of why I think she knows full well at this point in the back of her mind, at least, this is my headcanon, that yes, indeed, they all can channel. I think she is putting off dealing with that.
Sure. She's like, well, I just need to confirm it. I need to gather some more information, make sure before I try to make a move.
Yeah.
And then now for something completely different, we have chapter 39, which is actually, when I think of it, it may be one of my favorite chapters. It's appropriately named A Cup of Wine.
Yes.
In which some dude in a bar gets Elaine drunk, so she decides to go tweak Tom's mustache in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Because apparently the Three Plum Court Tavern serves bottomless well drinks to pretty ladies. Or just to Elaine. It's just this one creepy dude that like keeps...
Maybe it was nickel shot night or something.
It's funny you say that. It makes me think of the wooden nickel back home.
Yeah.
They actually made the news for doing that. I mean, it was a whole big to do a couple of years ago.
There was like national news, wasn't it?
Yeah, not a good picture for our hometown there.
Yeah, not so great.
But anyway, so she had the magical cup that never empties, and she's like, I only had one glass of wine, and then she kind of stumbles upstairs.
Right.
And she confronts Tom, kind of like knocks on his door drunkenly and tweaks his mustache. And then he gets really mad at her when she starts trash talking her mom. He's like, you do not talk about your mom that way.
Yeah.
She's like basically figured out who he is, but she's drunk and will not remember it in the morning.
Yep.
So he takes her back to her room where Nynaeve promptly dunks her head in the water a bunch of times. And Elaine says, I think I'm going to be sick. Nynaeve's like, what were you thinking? And
Nynaeve, always supportive and maternal, and I'm just kidding. She is
not
the worst person to have if you're needing a tender kind of approach.
And Elaine literally says, I only had one cup. Elaine, this is like your freshman year of college, isn't it? Clearly have no idea. So she's like, kind of sort of sobered up after having her head dunked a few times. But it's Nynaeve's turn to go to Tai'Shar Riyadh. So I just imagine Elaine like sitting on a stool, just kind of like swaying a little bit, like trying to stay awake, which is a fun image. So Nynaeve goes to Tai'Shar Riyadh, and we encounter Slayer, who tries to kill her. And so this is a question. It
says he strangely looks like Lan. By the way,
right? It does say that. Was it clear to you at this point who Slayer was?
Not. Nope.
Yeah,
nope, not even a little.
It wasn't to me either. Now, and looking back, it's like I see how it could have been, but it wasn't to me.
Right. Yeah. I feel like this is one of those things that you really do either have to go to the wiki or you have to read it to get the full
the second time through
picture. Yeah, of who Slayer is.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, and I think that there are hints in a certain sense. It isn't immediately obvious, especially the first read through. So tries to kill her, but Birgitte saves her. I mean, this is one of those times we get this kind of ongoing developing relationship of kind of like back and forth between Birgitte and both Nynaeve and Elaine when they're in Tai'Shar Riyadh. She helps them out. So the next morning, Tom asks Elaine how she's doing, and she said she doesn't remember much because I may have eaten some bad apple jelly.
It's really bad apple jelly.
Yeah, real bad apple jelly.
I'm going to use that as a code word. I think that guy had some really bad apple jelly.
Exactly. Elaine bandages Nynaeve where the arrow nicked her in Tai'Shar Riyadh. which I thought was interesting. And Nynaeve actually has like a hangover cure for her, just like try to make her feel better. Chapter 40, back to Perrin, and
6 days have passed since the rescue of Emond's Field villagers from the White Cloaks.
Perrin is sitting in an apple orchard where his whole family is buried, which is like, it's like a really kind of depressing image. He's like just sitting there thinking about it. Lord Luke shows up, and Perrin says,
smell good.
Yeah, Perrin thinks he smells inhuman. So apparently the Two Rivers people have dubbed him Perrin Golden Eyes. He's now ongoing proof that he's sort of in charge of every, like they're looking to him as a leader. So they've been killing Trollocs here and there, Emir Draw. Luke thinks they should go back to Emond's Field, but Perrin just is on the hunt for Trollocs because he wants to kill all the Trollocs that killed his family. It's fair, and to like kind of make the Two Rivers safe again. Even though really he probably knows he should go back, and that would probably be the smart thing to do. But then they find out that there's some Trollocs nearby that can be ambushed. Lord Luke just sort of conveniently leaves before the fighting. So they decide to try to ambush the Trollocs. But then they get sudden Trolloc attack number or whatever it is. They get attacked.
645.
They get attacked, and this is not a good one for our heroes. There's
no one expects the Trolloc Inquisition.
So then they take some losses themselves. They head out of the Waterwood, head back towards Emond's Field.
Fortunately, Ivan shows up and takes off a Trolloc's head before it can get to Perrin.
Right.
This is the first time that they suffer considerable loss.
Yeah, and these are like kids, a lot of them, and so this is like kind of brings home the point that this isn't all just like fun and games, because they really were kind of in that kind of mindset of like, oh yeah, we're gonna go hunt Trollocs and this is a big adventure. Well, until they slowly start getting slaughtered by Trollocs.
Right, up to this point you kind of get the picture that they were kind of just mowing them down like grass, but they're kind of reminded here with a fade on their sides, the Trollocs are actually very deadly.
Right. So then they come across Tuatha On and decide they're gonna stay there for the night. But the Aiel, of course, will not approach those they call the Lost Ones. Of course, we know why now, and so they decide they're not gonna stay, which makes sense. This is the same group of Tinkers that Perrin met when he was with Elias.
Right.
And so they're like, "Oh, Perrin, you still fighting, huh? It's kind of sad." And he sees Aram again. Aram is still kind of supercilious and, oh, you could never follow the way of the leaf.
Yeah. Aram, he seems a little hot-headed, maybe a little arrogant for Tuatha On. Like, most of the Tinkers are very humble and seem to be kind of mild in their personality. You do get he kind of sets himself apart here, reminding us that, he's a little different than the rest of them.
Yeah, and his story, certainly continues to develop in this book, and there's at least one scene that's really sad. We'll get to that. So this is also where Perrin finally asks Fael, finally confronts her. It's like, okay, who is your father really? And she tells him that,
because she's been kind of going back and forth. Oh, he's a merchant.
Yeah, no, but who are you really?
This or whatever.
And he is Davram Bashir, one of the great captains, and he's not just like an ice pepper merchant or whatever. She's like, I wasn't lying about that. It just didn't tell the whole truth.
Yes, one of his estates, they sell ice peppers.
Exactly. So, and she's like, well, then if I've told you that, then tell me, basically tell me about tell me what's really going on, with you. And he kind of tells her the story about Elias Mashera, how he learned how he could talk to wolves, how his eyes change color. And he actually says, so easy sometimes, especially in the dream, I forget I'm a man, not a wolf. If one of those times I don't remember quickly enough, I'll be a wolf. There won't be anything of me left. And she says, if your ears are really that sharp, I will have to watch what I say close to you. So she just kind of takes it in stride.
There's a degree to which, the people that get frustrated with Fael, I tend to feel like she is so perfect for Perrin.
Yeah,
and this is one of the ways.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't. She's like, I don't care about that.
She's just not fazed by that kind of thing at all.
Because again, she's from the borderlands. Like, that's not a big deal.
Right. She's seen some really crazy stuff up there, presumably. So everything is kind of like, as long as it's not crazy weird creatures coming out of nowhere to attack and kill me, then it's not a big deal.
Right, exactly. So then we go back to Perrin in the Wolf Dream, scouting around Emond's Field in the kind of see if he can figure out where the Trollocs are. Goes to the Waygate, notices that there is one leaf on this side of the gate. revealing this unlocked, because Loyal had left both leafs on this side of the gate saying so that it would be locked, but it's just like, okay, well, that's obviously where the Trollocs and Myrddraal are coming through.
It's also the first hint that there is someone on this side that was on this side of the gate that maybe doesn't need to be trusted.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like, how did that happen? Somebody must have unlocked it, basically.
Right.
So, and this is when Perrin encounters Slayer, and they kind of have like a back and forth where they're trying to chase each other.
Yeah.
And then Perrin wakes up. He's like, I don't want to do this right now. Perrin tells Fael about the open way gate. But she's like, we can't do anything about that right now. You're wounded, because he was still wounded from the Trolloc attack, and it's not like there was an Aes Sedai there that could heal him. So they leave, go back to Emond's Field, and find that things have changed since they've been away. The farmers who've come to Emond's Field have sort of tried to strengthen the defenses and build sharpened stakes, put sharpened stakes up to prevent the Trollocs from getting in. They have catapults, and they get back, and everyone is admiring Perrin, and
they're getting ready for the orcs to attack Helm's Deep, basically.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Verin says that he needs healing, but apparently she's not good at healing. It's so interesting to me how these different Aes Sedai have different strengths in the power, but apparently Alana could heal him.
In general, Verin is not that powerful too, right, exactly, in the power.
Yeah. She just has the knowledge. Typically.
Right. She's pretty sharp. And of course, we find out again and again that she's smarter than we realize. But yeah, her strength in the power is relatively small. As you get the feeling that Brown Aja in general.
Right. They're much more focused on, writing books and keeping up with history and doing research and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Verin basically takes Perrin to Alana to be healed. And this is where we sort of get the sad moment where the family of all the kids who were with him were like, hey, Will, whoever it is, come, and then there's some of them that are like, where's my kid? And oh wait, no, they've been killed by Trollocs, and so Perrin is sort of taking this guilt on himself, this horrible guilt that these people have died under his leadership,
right?
But he's also not mortally wounded, but very wounded. So
Loyal arrives, and Perrin tells him that Waygate is being used by Trollocs again, and Loyal blames himself. He's very upset. I should have destroyed the leaf and taken it away. So Perrin,
he just kind of passes out. You can sort of figure with the way Loyal is behaving, he's going to go do something about it.
Right.
So Perrin wakes back up, and he's in a bed, and he's like, oh crud, I need to go figure out what's going on with the Waygate, and jumps up and realizes he's naked. And Fael's standing there, and he's recovering from the flu. He's really weak, but he's determined, so he throws his clothes on, and Fael's like, no, you need to get back in bed. And he's like, no, I will not. So he's kind of walking out of the room with her holding on to him, hanging off of him. And he's like, I'm going to go find him, because she says that Loyal and Gaul have gone to the Waygate. And he's like, well, I'm going to go, I can catch up to them on my horse. And she says, you're mad, Perrin Aebara. What chance you can even find them in that forest? And he's like, I'm not so bad at tracking myself. I can find them. She says, you can get yourself killed, you hairy fool. And then they fall down the stairs together.
Yes.
Which is a great moment. And then she's on top of him. He's like, oh, are you okay?
It's kind of funny when you read it. To me, it's got to be in the show, because this is representative of the kind of tone that you have, where when we just had a scene where Perrin lost a lot of young people, then he has to face their families, and he's on the brink of death, and he passes out. And so things are looking pretty dire. And I feel like we kind of need this moment of just goofy physical comedy for a second to kind of bounce back from that. And I think it's also indicative of one of the ways this book is not grimdark.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And and maybe it's one of the reasons I like this book so much, is it does have those moments that are just kind of comical and brings us back from the brink of oh man, everything's so bleak.
Yeah. There's a shout of Trollocs.
Right. And Perrin's like, I'm going to go check that out, even if I feel like I'm still kind of feeling not good. And so Bane and Shiad show up and says that there are a lot of Trollocs that are about to attack. So Perrin goes to Tam and Abel and Bran, and this is like, all right, what are we gonna do? And Bran's like, all right, we need to get ready. Let's get, we're ready for this. Let's get everybody in their places. Perrin would like to send Fael back to the end, but he realizes that it doesn't matter, that she's not going to go, and also she probably wouldn't be any safer there than she would be with him anyway.
This is also when the Wolfhead banner shows up. This is a moment that, if they played it right, I think could be comedic. If every time the Wolfhead banner shows up the first several times, he's like, put that thing away. Like,
right,
and then it just keeps showing up behind him, like maybe he doesn't even see it. And
yeah, Monty Python kind of thing. Yeah, okay.
Right. And he's like,
don't get rid of that thing. We don't need that crap.
Put that.
Right. So then there is a minor Trolloc attack, but the archers and catapult are able to kill all of them, including 3 Fades. And so everybody's like, yeah, we beat them.
But Tam and Tomas are smarter than that.
Yeah, they're like, wait a minute. This was not really this was a feint, if anything. This was not a real battle. So then Fael and Perrin, where we find out basically that the Tinkers were attacked. And so they've come to the village to seek shelter against Trollocs. This is really interesting because it's like some of the residents, some of the people in Emond's Field are clearly like, we don't want them here. And right. it is clear that there's this prejudice against the Tinkers, like, oh, they're gonna steal our daughters away, and all of the typical prejudice that comes along with the Tinkers. And Perrin's like, don't cut that nonsense out. These people just got attacked by Trollocs. Let them in. And so Perrin starts to wonder, how many Trollocs are really out there. He decides he wants to go after Loyal and Gaul, and Harold Luhan asks him a question. And before he can do anything, there are like a bunch of people who are asking him for advice. And so he's sort of drawn into trying to manage the town and starts just trying to provide answers and solutions, and doesn't really do much, but it's like people just want the reassurance that he's paying attention to them and that that he's in charge. So then Lord Luke arrives, has a Myrddraal head, and says, he's got tall tales of having done a bunch of killing himself. Right. We've never actually seen him fight, so it's like, well, Lord knows what he actually did.
Right.
Perrin really realizes that he hasn't had anything to eat, and he still is recovering from healing. So he's just like, I'm gonna go get something to eat. And this is when Fael comes in, and
we've arrived at a place where Aram walks in, and this
is a really intense scene because we find out that Aram's mother has died in the fight with the Trollocs, and so Aram's angry and sad and goes to pick up a sword, and right as his grandmother sort of walks in and sees him, and she's like, no, Aram, don't do it, it's not the way of the leaf. And Perrin sort of steps up and defends him and says, any man can learn to defend himself if he so desires. And it's just like this really sad scene of, you can see the parallel where Perrin sort of had similar thoughts about, the hammer and the axe. It's like,
right.
I don't want to live this life, but this is the sort of the reality of the world that they live in right now. That that there's violence everywhere and there's no way around it. And so he's like, no, if he wants to pick up the sword and learn to use it, he can. And he tells him, go get Tam to teach you how to use, I don't know how to use a sword. You get Tam to teach you. And it's just this really sort of sad, powerful scene.
As this is the end of the chapter, and I think probably we're coming up on a good place to pause, I think we can switch over into talking some spoilers.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
So if you don't want to hear some spoilers for future books or whatever, then go ahead and turn it off now and join us next week. If you have read the books or you don't care about spoilers, one of the interesting things about this scene upon a reread is knowing eventually what happens with Aram's character.
Right.
He, in the end, turns against Perrin. Masema convinces him that Perrin is a shadow spawn, and Aram dies in the midst of trying to kill Perrin. Aram's whole story is totally tragic.
It really is, yeah.
But it's just so interesting because here in this moment, I remembered it a little differently than I think it actually happens, because I think I was kind of thinking that Perrin wasn't quite as supportive, but he actually is very much he's
like the reason that Aram was probably going to do it anyway, but he just encourages him. He's he's like supports him in his choice to and this is like Aram is following in the tradition of Aiel, who the Jin Aiel and the Tinkers who turned from the way of the leaf, and of course they picked up a spear and he actually picked up a sword.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of that, especially since we just found out about that a few chapters ago.
Right.
But also just it's interesting looking forward, knowing that how would it have played differently if Perrin had said to him, "Don't."
Right, exactly. Yeah, like you don't need to throw away this thing you have, the way of the leaf,
Yeah, and I think in some ways we miss a little opportunity when we get into that section of the books. Really, is towards the end of the slog, so things are kind of.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I completely had forgotten about that. So that's interesting.
Again, it's one of those things that's easy to forget, but I'm just thinking about that moment. He comes after Perrin. And in the midst of it, I can't remember who it is. Somebody shoots an arrow through him, and he dies. And Perrin, of course, is just heartbroken over it all.
Right, because he never would want that to happen. I mean, he felt like he felt some ownership of Aram's future, probably just because of this scene and others like it.
Exactly.
Like he felt like he was someone that he had sort of mentored to some degree.
In one big way, it is somewhat his fault that he had that sword at all.
Right.
And so,
yeah, for sure.
Anyway, it's just interesting reflecting back on that. Now we've got to talk about Verin.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought her back up. Yeah. It's like, we were talking about the three oaths and how often enough Aes Sedai would stand there like, oh, do I feel threatened or not? But of course, Verin is not tied to the three oaths, and she totally could have thrown a fireball at whoever she wanted, but she didn't want to give herself away. So she's not going to do that. And and also her motivations are suspect at best.
Yes. You also have a lot of stuff in these chapters and more in the chapters we'll get into over the next couple of weeks, where you see Verin observing things that in retrospect make it clear that she knew more about Slayer and maybe Wolf Brothers or whatever in general, the Wolf Dream, than maybe she was letting on also.
Sure.
Which in general, you can pretty much bank on Verin knowing more than she's letting on.
Oh, yeah.
That's her whole thing.
Right.
It's much more interesting to see her react to different things that Perrin says and the others say in response to her. But something that's clear, and I don't know if it's as much the chapters we just got into as it is the ones that follow, but in later books, when Perrin meets the Shan-Chan and helps lead them against the Shido, one of the Shan-Chan leaders says to him something about, when the Wolf King holds the hammer, then basically the last battle is near. And Verin actually refers to that indirectly.
Yeah.
She sees him with the hammer. She says something about, interesting or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that's fair.
It's just interesting. These chapters to me, when I say they all read differently, I just go through all of that and think Verin was written in such a way that, yes, she clearly had a lot more information than she was letting on.
Every time we read a scene with Verin, it's pretty clear that that's the case. You can read every scene differently with her with just a little bit of backstory of who she is, and a little bit more knowledge, as opposed to like this image that she portrays as this person who's just absent-minded, like, I'm just kind of bumbling along.
We are stopping there, and we will pick it up next week with chapter 46 of The Shadow Rising. As always, we love to hear from you, so visit our website at tsmpodcast.com, fill out our contact form, and say, hey, if you say something nice and friendly, we'll give you a shout out on the podcast.
Heck yeah.
And you can always contact us on Podcast TSM on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Jump on there. We post some funny memes that are related to Wheel of Time. And if you have theories or whatever, what do you think these other cast members are going to play that we haven't figured out who they're supposed to be doing?
I was going to say the one that we talked about briefly, the one that we're saying could be Perrin's wife or whatever. It seems more likely that'd be Elaine or Min.
Right.
Like, come on, guys. If they really are going to give Perrin a wife at the beginning of the show, this show is going a wildly different direction from the books. I mean, there's just no getting around that.
That's my hope too. And I almost wonder if whatever was put on that online CV was done so as a red herring.
Sure. I would hope so.
What are your thoughts on that? And anything else in regards to the books or the upcoming show? We'd love to hear about it. So let us know. And until next time, Tai'Shar Manethrin.